quick glimpse of our moderator. First of all, he's my best friend. He just don't know it yet. He's my best friend, Dr. Alvin Thomas. Dr. Alvin Thomas is your moderator for this panel today. Give it up for him. He is an associate professor for UW-Madison School of Human Ecology. He is a clinical psychologist and assistant professor of human development and family studies at the University of Wisconsin. His work focuses on the intersection of positive child and youth development and father involvement, particularly among Black children, fathers, and families. Through an ecological lens, his research addresses youth violence, fatherhood, parenting, race, and discrimination. Thomas's work has been recognized by the APA and other organizations. He is also the host of multi-award-winning Black Fatherhood podcast. So if you have not downloaded that podcast, please do so today. And that podcast promotes and strengthens Black fatherhood. So without further ado, we're going to turn it over to our amazing panelists.
Thank you very much, Dr. Danielle Hairston-Green. Danielle, I think you forgot that I was promoted recently. I'm an associate professor.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I stand corrected. Associate. That makes a difference, y'all.
I'm supposed to be your best friend, right? How are you going to forget that? You have to talk. So thank you very much, everybody, for being part of this activity. We're hoping for a rousing conversation with some very awesome guests who represent a full cross-section of the Madison community, but also a cross-section of just general society. And so hearing how their different experiences, their different roles in our community impact or is influenced by fatherhood is going to be hopefully a real treat. We look forward to, of course, your engagement once we have some space for that. But let's jump into that conversation. So today's event, the Fathers in Focus Conference, came out of about 2 years of work. Last year, we spent some time surveying the UW-Madison community to try to understand what the fatherhood landscape looked like on the campus, what kind of research was happening, what kind of community work was happening. And out of that, we saw some of the main conversations, main challenges, some of the explicit benefits that fathers were talking about, and we wanted to create space for fathers to engage some of those conversations, to be in some of those spaces, and to champion some of the challenges that they've been talking about. And hence, this year's activity. I want to welcome our guest. On my extreme right is Dr. Shon Barnes, the Chief of Police of Madison. And right next to him, on his left, is Dr. Mike Koenigs, Professor of Psychiatry at UW-Madison. To my left, immediate left, is Dr. Joe Gothard, the Madison Metropolitan School District Superintendent. And to my extreme left is Mr. Shannon Ross, Director of an organization called The Community, which is focused on post-incarceration and re-entry experiences and peace building. So thank you very much again to the panelists for agreeing to be here. I don't want to spend a ton of time talking because I want us to have enough space for the discussion. But the main objective of the discussion, like I said at the beginning, is to try to understand how fatherhood has influenced both the roles that you play in community, but also how the roles that you play in community influence and might influence fatherhood. And then thinking creatively about how we could champion and focus fatherhood in creative, interdisciplinary ways. So just let that simmer for a little bit, and then we'll jump into it. So first of all, how does your professional experience shape your understanding of fatherhood and its impact on community development. And we'll start with you first and then kind of go down the line.
Right. You guys hear me?
All right. Well, first of all, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Dr. Thomas, for giving me the opportunity to kind of share some thoughts on this very valuable topic. So for me, it's a little different because I am a law enforcement officer, a police officer, chief of police. But before any of all that, you know, I'm a father, I'm a black man who has to live in America. And, you know, I consider myself that who just happens to be a chief of police. So I really try to bring different perspectives to the job and see how my role and my responsibility really affects fatherhood in general. So police officers are first responders. So that means that we're often the first people in government to see the effects of what has gone wrong in society. And for me, that means that there's a great responsibility when you are the first person to notice something. And so what we have been trying to do here in Madison, and what I've been trying to do my entire career, is simply create a sense of community where the police are part of that community. This whole idea of community policing, to me, means that we are indeed a part of the community, and we're supposed to use our resources, whatever they may be, to influence and help the community. And oftentimes what we see when we respond to a situation where the outcome is negative is that there's been some kind of breakdown in community. And when we see that, we owe it to ourselves to try to figure out who is best to fix this. For example, we have a mental health co-responder model in our police department where we have mental health clinicians who are embedded within our police department. They have IDs, they can go out with officers, they help us with follow-up, because we're learning, or we should have learned, that we may not always be the best person to fix that problem, even though we're the first one to identify it, because someone will pick up a phone and they'll call 911. And we also are seeing and responding to an extremely increase, I think, in juvenile crime and what happens with our kids. And to me, when that happens as a father, I see maybe a lack of modeling, I see maybe a lack of support, and some of those tough lessons that my father and all the father figures that were in my life taught me. And so there's a responsibility there. So about 2 years ago, shortly after I arrived, I've been here for 4 years, we started working on our vision and what we really wanted for this police department and how we could contribute to helping. And our vision is really, really simple. We want to be a national model for exceptional policing. And when I say national model, it's because if you were around in 2020, you realize that something happened in another city that affected the entire world. And so we can no longer police for Madison. We have to police with the expectation that what we do could affect the entire world. So when every officer, detective, investigator goes on a call, they should be thinking, is my behavior going to change the world? And if it does, can it be for the better? We want to be a national model for exceptional policing, and we want to be committed to doing 3 things. So in everything that we do, you should see selfless public service, which means that our police department put the community and their needs over our own. We do things like de-escalation training and duty to intervene. It's okay for my police officers to back away from calls. We've gone on barricaded subjects before and packed up and left. We try to look at what happens when we make arrests and how do we provide services to children who have to see that. One of the biggest projects that I was involved with in my career, not here, was called the Child Development Community Policing Model out of Yale University, What that model simply says is every child is a victim if we show up. And so we have a responsibility to connect that child to services. And so in my former agency, when we went on a call and a child was present, we had a child advocate embedded in the police department who connected that child to services if they wanted it, if the parents allowed it, within 24 hours. If it was a death within that time period, they would come out, they had on call, they were on call. And so that's some of the things that we're trying to do. And then of course, the last is evidence-based policing. We're really big on research in our department. We have several publications on our MARI program where we're understanding that people with opioid or drug addiction, their crimes are really a symptom of something greater. And so the program says if you commit to doing a 60-day intensive treatment, we will dismiss those charges. And we're seeing great results when it comes to recidivism, people not reoffending. But my passion has always been and will always be our children. I started my professional career, I was telling the superintendent, he knows this, as a school teacher. I was a history teacher, I have a degree in history, secondary education, and I loved it. I still do, I still love teaching. But one day, one of my best students, Shon Barnes, didn't show up for school one day. And when I inquired, because it wasn't normal for him, I found out that he and a friend, a cousin, had committed a home invasion robbery for money. The homeowner was home, he didn't know it, and they shot and killed the homeowner. And I never saw him again. And from that came a conversation with the school resource officer about how can we help? How can we mentor? How can we do better? And when we got done with the conversation, he goes, you should be a cop. Like, the way you think is the way we need to think in policing. And 2 years later, I was in the police academy because I want to build a police department that's part of the community, that's part of the village. And when you see our children being involved in crime, being involved in gangs, there is a lack of modeling there. There's a lack of inclusion there. And there's a lack of us wrapping our arms around them. It doesn't matter if you're their father or not. It doesn't matter if they know you. We all have a responsibility to our community. I'll just end with, of course, my favorite African proverb, which simply says, it takes a village to do what? Right? What's the second part of the proverb? Proverbs are always balanced, so I'm going to leave you with the whole thing. It takes a village to raise a child, but the child who is not embraced by the village will burn it down just to feel its warmth. So when we see our children struggling, when we see our children looking to us for guidance, they're asking to be embraced. And so I'm trying to build a police department that partners with the school district, that partners with nonprofits, that partners with Focus Interruption, that partners with UW, that partners with the Office of Extension, because I want everyone to know, especially our young folks, that they are a part of the community and that there is a place for you in Madison. And I'm gonna do everything in my power to ensure that happens. Thank you very much.
So I'm a faculty member of the Department of Psychiatry at UW-Madison, and I'll just echo a few things I think that Chief Barnes said. One is that I'm showing up here as a father of three, and that's always front and center in my identity and in my purpose. The work that we do in my research group has the goal of improving mental health supports and services to currently and formerly incarcerated people in our community. And the foundation of that work is community engagement. So much like I think Chief Barnes was saying in his line of work. And it's through that effort of building relationship, trying to really understand what are the concerns, what are the issues, what are the opportunities, what are the barriers, and through our capabilities, through research and providing other sorts of clinical and support services. How do we address those needs? And in the work that we've done, which includes contact with community in a variety of different venues. They can be as formal as an advisory board where we meet once a month. They can be informal as a text or a phone call, and everything in between. One of the key things that we've learned is that when you're talking about mental supports and services, who is providing that service is of critical importance. So it's got to be somebody who has trust, credibility within the community that support or service is intended to help. And what that means in a lot of cases, and especially maybe we're talking about people who've been directly impacted by incarceration, is somebody with that lived experience. Someone who knows what that's like to be incarcerated, to experience trauma, to grow up in those certain kinds of environments. And so I'm very proud of the work that we do in partnering with community, where we have directly impacted folks directing projects with us and really leading us in that work. And as it relates to fatherhood, in particular, this is an issue that comes up over and over again, in two ways. One, I would say, is like looking back over the experience of somebody's life. What did it mean for them if they didn't have a father present, or if they had a father present who was, not particularly supportive, or engaging in behaviors or things that made life dangerous or difficult for them. And then the other side is for people who maybe don't have the relationship with their children that they want. How do they go about correcting that or building on that? What we found is that people, so I think a lot of us as in the academic sphere, especially in psychiatry, as a field, look at people as disorders or collections of symptoms that need to be fixed. And what we're learning is that's not how people are seeing themselves, right? They don't see themselves as, we want you from the university to address these deficits for us. They say, we want opportunities. We want opportunities to grow our lives, build our families. The same thing anybody wants. And so I guess I'll just conclude by saying, in this space, I see it as critically important that we continue to create that opportunity to get that feedback and really work in a collaborative way, such that our research and our supports and services are really done in partnership with those who are directly impacted.
Thank you so much.
Great, thank you so much, Dr. Thomas and Dr. Hairston-Green. It's an honor to be here today. Wonderful to see all of you here too, to discuss and have some dialogue around this really important topic. I think I'll share just a few lenses of what I bring into this conversation. The first is assumptions are dangerous. When we assume because we don't see a present male adult role model or father in the life of a child, many times there are assumptions that are made, and they're buried deep inside of us. Perhaps it's that this child doesn't have an active parent or role model, or if they do, they don't care. They don't care about education. Why would I call if they're not present? These are the kinds of assumptions that can lead to, lifelong voids in the way that we serve children in our community. So it's really important that we think about framing the presence of adults and fathers in the lives of children. We are a community. Our community can define father and role model in many different ways, and there are other ways to look for support in supporting our children. The other is this, I grew up with a single mom, number 5 of 6, and my father wasn't present in my life, and when he moved out in 3rd grade, he's also Black, so my Black identity was gone. So this is something that, as I think about the work that I do, it's very important to me that we truly get to know who our children are. Help them with their identity. To be 9 years old and to have a part of you that's gone, and you're looking for defining what Blackness means to you, was a really difficult thing. I'm one of the lucky ones. I grew up right here on the east side, and at Senate Middle School, my middle school teacher was Mrs. Lois Bell, the first and only Black teacher I ever had. I was fortunate. Right? She became that male role model for me, that Black role model for me in lots of ways. I could tell you stories about it, and it's really beautiful. We're really close today, 40 years later as well. The other thing I'll share is that Many of you know I'm back in Madison. I started in May. I was in St. Paul and another suburb of the Twin Cities. Oh, thank you. And found myself in a community that I didn't know very well, but I got to know very quickly. And one of our middle schools was unsafe, and I knew it because I was getting emails. The board was getting emails. Folks and teachers were showing up at public comment and saying so much. So I just started showing up. I started walking the halls, started getting to know teachers, students, staff, and I decided, you know what, I'm going to come every other Wednesday, and I would like a group of boys to work with. And please don't give me the boys who you think are going to behave and the ones that I want to see. See the kids running in the hallway right now, that's what I want.
Yeah, that's true.
And the importance of this is that 2 years later, as I was leaving, one of the students in the group was apprehended in the community. He had a BB gun. And thank God he was not shot or injured for having that weapon in the community. That's been a problem. And his care team asked me to be present at his intervention. So this was a social worker from the community, his grandmother, a neighborhood police officer. And it was an incredible meeting. Instead of punishment, it was how can we repair harm that was done? How can we make sure that you learn from this? How could we make sure that you know we're not going to turn our back on you? But the most incredible thing I learned from that interaction was that on his way out, his grandmother said, this is right before spring break, that he was going to be going to Chicago for spring break to see his father, and he hadn't seen his father since he was 1 year old. So it really made me think, and I didn't know that, but it made me think about the roles that we can have, and not always just providing what a father might have been able to provide, but I think we have to look at our community as a network of connection, and how can we remain connected? I don't want to ever judge anyone's situation, but I do want to interrogate the connections that we have as a community. And I think that's really important. Now, the other thing is, and I'll end, is that I think historically our norms in schools are that, there are certain roles for certain people. Gender plays a big role in that. If you look at PTOs across our district and any district I've been in, white women are who make up the majority of PTOs. They just do, and they have for a long time. So it isn't as though fathers we haven't broken through a lot of those norms in terms of embracing community and working together in partnership. Now, we've got many community schools that I think do a great job of meeting families, parents, fathers where they're at. I think could be a really important step. As I was preparing for today, sadly, I wish I could bring to you all the great work MMSD is doing to look at how we engage fathers in the work that we do, and we don't have a lot that's really direct in that way. And I'm okay to say that because I'm looking at a community right now who I know cares about this topic, and I know that you'll help us get better. Thank you.
So my name is Shannon Ross. I'm as Dr. Thomas said, the executive director of an organization called the Community. I'm sitting here listening to everybody, and grateful to be here, grateful for the invite. Thank you, Dr. Green. And I'm asking myself, why am I here? Because you're all doctors, for one, and you all have experience and polish in a realm that is far beyond where I have so far, 4 years after a 17-year prison sentence. And I was just kind of thinking about it. I guess what I bring to maybe, hopefully, a moment like this is that I represent work in which I deal with the nuance and complexity of sin and irresponsibility very deeply. I represent that, I know that, and I represent the people that I think have lived that life and are looking for understanding every day in that area of our society, how we categorize and how we disregard folks, even as fathers. And in that work with the prison system and people coming home, and having my experiences with now being a father of a 3-year-old boy in Cairo on the 23rd, and just the way that I know folks are dealing with life as men and as human beings, and then as fathers, and how there's those layers when you have so many restrictions and heaviness is put upon you from having gone into prison and having to come out and find your success, and what it means to find success in a society that is constantly telling you you're not even human. And then having to also be able to provide for another being while you're doing that. It's just, the layers of it are very interesting, and a lot of times it's surmountable for folks. And when I look at that, I find it interesting that we have these laws and these rules and these restrictions for people that have a record, and some of them make sense. I would say the overwhelming majority of them don't. But if we frame that as how are we preparing the next generation, how are we impacting the adults who are preparing the next generation, and how are those fathers having all these layers of difficulty in getting housing and getting a job and getting into school and getting resources, how are they to provide for that next generation? And how are we also separating and creating these areas where fathers have to focus on or feel they have to focus on themselves at the expense of their children? And it's just, as I'm sitting just thinking about that, and I will answer some more questions as we go through the panel. It just strikes me how we have so many folks that are really well-intentioned and really doing great work around the space, and how can I take some of that back to, as you spoke to the collaboration aspect, the folks that are inside that are coming home and representing, and even for myself, I have the representation of my father in the work that I'm doing. I have the representation of people I've seen and listened to, but I'm still pretty new to society. I'm 23 when you think of the years I've been actually free, and trying to be a father, and just learning those things, and a lot of grace of being a parent. I think you have to have. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So I'm going to go around and just with each panelist and ask them a specific question just to them, and I want to make sure I leave some space for talking about some of the creative work that can be done. So I'm going to ask you to limit your response to about 2 minutes. So I don't know how you're going to do that. But pull it in. Limit your response to about 2 minutes. Was that?
You looked at me.
I tried to look at both sides just to make sure. Dr. Barnes, in what ways do you believe that law enforcement can support fathers in creating those safer communities and safer families?
Yeah, so one of the things that we're big on is community education. I think a lot of times, we as fathers, especially as Black fathers, we have to have different conversations with our children that maybe some other people don't. And I think, helping people have those conversations, even though, personally, I reject the idea that, people have to behave differently around police officers. But I do understand that Madison, what I control is just what I control. And sometimes people travel outside of Madison, and there are 18,000 police agencies in America and 180,000 police officers. And I don't know how they all train, and I don't know how they all think, and I don't know what their standards are. I don't know what their leaders believe in. And so one way that I try to support is we have something called Community Classroom, where we come out in the community and we sit and we do seminars on what are your rights and privileges when it comes to vehicle stops. What should you say or do when it comes to being arrested? Your right to remain silent, when does that actually apply? When does it not apply? When should you cooperate? When should you not cooperate? And then we also share some things about research. One of the things that I would share with you briefly is that there was some research done on officers' decisions to charge juveniles. Like, when do officers charge juveniles? We have a lot of discretion when it comes to that. We can take them home if we want to. But something that came out of that was, number one, whether or not a parent was accessible. That was the number one thing, whether or not a parent was accessible. Number two, did the child accept some responsibility for what happened? Number three was, when the parent shows up, was there a communication to the officer that the child would receive correction and or punishment at home? And when those three things are satisfied, children or juveniles were less likely to be charged. So we share that with folks. And so when a child does something and you can't find a parent, or there's no accountability, there's no responsibility, the officer feels compelled, according to the research, to levy charges, because in some cases it's the only way a child can get help. And so we try to support fathers through education and through research and through kind of letting people know in the community what their options are and what the law says, and so everyone is fully informed when you have those very tough conversations with your loved ones.
Thank you very much. That was very succinct. Dr. Koenig, so speak a little bit to the potential psychological benefits when fathers are involved, actively involved in their children's lives, and also maybe to the potential negative implications when fathers are not involved.
Sure. So when you're talking about the psychological development of a child, I mean, there's almost no aspect of that that's not affected by a father's presence in their life. And so there's a few things to highlight. The emotional stability and sense of security that the child has, that will give them, confidence to try new things, that will allow them to, manage stress, regulate their emotions when things don't go well. That relates to, behavior problems and behavior issues. So, kids who have an active and involved parent tend to have fewer issues with, aggression, violence, things like that. Consequently, less involvement with the criminal legal system, less discipline at school, less problems at school. Their academic achievement is better. Cognitive skills are stronger, so problem-solving abilities, ability to think critically. Their self-esteem is higher. They feel better about themselves. They have more confidence. They have a sense of self-worth and value. And one of the points I want to make, to just pick up on something that Shannon was talking about, he was expressing some, what are my credentials? Like, one thing I can tell you about raising kids, they don't care if you have a PhD, right? They don't care if you're the chief of police or the superintendent. That doesn't matter. When you're holding a crying baby, we all have what we need inside of us to deliver what that child needs, right? We all have the capacity for warmth and connection and responsiveness and showing up, and that's going to look up, differently for every one of us. We have different families, different circumstances, and all of that. But I just think that's such a critical thing to think about, that we all have it in us, and it's not just how we treat our children, it's also how we interact with other members of the family, and maybe especially the other parent, wife, whatever, because our kids are always learning. Like, sometimes I think as parents we think, okay, now I'm going to turn around and teach you this lesson. They never stop learning. They never stop observing, and so you have to be cognizant of that too, that how they see you treat a spouse or a partner is something that they're gonna take with them forward in their lives as well.
Thank you very much. So Dr. Gothard, Mike was just talking about some of the potential benefits to kids. He talked about things like academic achievement, self-esteem, self-concept, all really great things that we would like to see our kids experience. But we know that schools are one of the spaces where fathers are less likely to be invited and less likely to be engaged. In fact, the ongoing story is, even if a father on the first day of school provides his contact information to the school, if the school ever needs to contact a parent, the default is to contact mom. And you only contact dad if there's some kind of disciplinary issue. So my question to you is, how does father involvement influence outcomes of children in the school district? And how can we draw fathers in more, create spaces to make fathers feel more welcome in those?
I'm glad Dr. Thomas mentioned that, because he's right. The most collaboration I've had with Black fathers, especially in my 31-year career, has been retribution, right? You're calling and say what the child has done wrong, what are you going to do? Not the best way to have an introductory relationship, welcoming to a parent, to a partner in a child's education. I think the other truth to this is that school years are 180 days long, 7.5 hours a day, Monday through Friday. There is so many other times influencing the successful education life of a child. That's where we need to be collaborative in new and better ways with the community. We shouldn't all be trying to serve the same child at the same time. We should do a map of when is the best locus of impact that we can have on a child, whether it's at a community center, it could be an out-of-school time, effort that so many of you, as I'm looking out at a room full of practitioners and youth service workers and providers. We need to get smart about that. We also need to identify the areas that need it most. You know, there's this whole equal way that sometimes systems interact is also not serving us as well at all. I would much rather have high impact in certain areas or with children who need it most and be really proud of that to build it out from there. But we can't spread ourselves so thin that we're not able to make impact. So my commitment would be, and I met with Dane County Human Services this week as an example as well. And yes, I was here 11 years ago and I remember a lot of the way things were. But we have to look at the ways that we can position ourselves to work collaboratively, not just in the school day, and not just in the traditional ways that we've done it in the past. We really need to work to get upstream and work on prevention. I was talking to a person in here earlier. Things are pretty quiet right now in a lot of our schools. We're off to a really good start. Let's not relax now. Let's go in and find out why. Let's engage even more. Instead of saying this is good enough, let's get better. Otherwise, we are going to be working in the same space about what are we going to do now that things aren't going well. You know, and that's the role that many of us have been in too often.
Thank you very much. That was really appreciated. So I want to step a little bit out of the role of moderator and just speak to you directly, Shannon. You said something which probably may have skipped over most of us. In your introduction, you were talking about yourself and the usual stuff, and then you mentioned your son's name. And I thought, nobody really is listening for your son's name. But in the moment, I sensed that what you were doing was grounding yourself. You were grounding yourself, and you were centering your reason for doing the work that you're doing. That at the center of this work is Cairo. The reason and the passion for this work is so Cairo has a better space, that he has a better community, that he has a better world. And I think across the panel, that's what I see, that the reason for doing this work is not to fill papers or to fill quotas or whatever. It is for the little people who are coming after us. And I really thank you that is why you're on this stage. And the experiences that you've gone through is what makes you able to speak to the things that you're able to speak to on the stage. So thank you very much for being here. And I want you to talk to us a little bit about fathers who are re-entering society and what are some of the challenges that they're facing as they're re-entering society, and how can communities assist with fathers as they're re-entering society. We had a paper with some colleagues at UW-Madison, and we were looking at the concept of recidivism, fathers who were potentially re-offending after freedom. And one of the main moderators or preventions for recidivism is that connection to your child, that centering to your child. I don't want my child to see this. Or even some fathers say, I don't want my child to come see me while I'm incarcerated. It hurts to not see them, but I don't want them to see this part of the world. I don't want them to see that this is something that exists. So as you think about all of that, what are some of the challenges for fathers who are re-entering society, and what are some ways that communities could support fathers?
Thank you for your commentary at the beginning of the question. I appreciate that. I'm also going to request another minute because you've added some extra spice to that question. The things that people coming home, that fathers need coming home. I mean, first of all, you have two different types of fathers that have a record. You have those that became a father after incarceration, and those that were a father going in. You even have some that became a father while they were incarcerated. It's a different story. And those are different needs, right? Very different needs. As you just spoke to, there's a powerful documentary called Daughters out. And what it does is it talks about a program in the DC jail where they have maybe about a 10-week program, and the men are learning about fatherhood. And then they have a father-daughter dance at the end of the program. It's really powerful. I dare you to watch it and not cry type of documentary. And the daughters are coming in there, and the fathers, some of them have a lot more time to do. Some of them are coming home soon. And I always am very questionable, no offense, Dr. Koenigs, but I can get questionable about the data used in the justice space on a lot of things. I think we've been pretty lazy with acquiring it sometimes. But they have found that the recidivism rate for the folks who take this program is below 10%, which if you know the recidivism data is really low across the country. And I was thinking about it, and there's all these programs we do for fathers and for people coming home to help them become, the man, the woman, the person that they want to be, to tap into their potential. But sometimes all you need in life is just one earthquake moment to completely change everything. It's not always a gradual stepping, right? It can just be an earthquake moment. And I think that father-daughter dance was that for some of the men that took that program, because fathers and daughters is a different relationship with a father and a daughter than there is with a father and a son. I think fathers just, in general, there's a sense of protectionism and having to be there that kicks in towards a daughter that it doesn't really kick in for a son. I speak that with no experience because I only have a son. I do not have a daughter yet. But that's what I've seen time and time again in my life. And so that moment from that movie, I think, impacting those men, it was that, right? So it just shows you the connection that can be had if done. But the catch-22 is that a lot of men do not want their kids to come see them. They don't want their families sometimes because it's just easier to do that time. So what do you do when people come home? How do you reintegrate? How do you connect when you have to get housing and a job and you have to figure out who you are and you have to just, if you've done more than 10 years, 5 years, how are you a free person? How do you even get your balance as a free person before you do anything else? And then you throw into that relationships, and I don't know how some of these things get done, but it's just all these layers that I think oftentimes are the same for fathers as they are for the same as anyone coming home, a lot of that. But in particular, if I were to pinpoint two things that really stand out as a heavy element for a father coming home, is the reunification. How do you become, in life of people who you haven't been around for a while, right? That's a difficulty. How do you engage with relationships? Like, how are you finding yourself with maybe back with the mother, dating, and how is the child going to deal with that? That's also common for most anyone that has a child and isn't coming home from prison. But child support is one that's very particularly heavy, I think, for people coming home. When you're incarcerated, it doesn't stop. Your arrears continue, so you come out with this $10,000, $15,000 burden sometimes to pay off that you can't get out from under. There's no bankruptcy, there's no way you can get out from under that. And so that is one, I think, that on top of all these other things that could be done to help fathers in maybe a policy legislative way, but on top of just, again, that grace. Because people coming home have at different levels of heaviness on them that people in society that don't have a record don't have. So you're looking at all the problems of a regular father and a regular person that's been existing, especially in the BIPOC community. And you throw on top of that an extra heaviness and weight and slowness of all the things you are trying to get done as an adult. And it's like, just have grace, listen to people. Understand that if somebody's not doing something right, just not throw more punishments at them or attack them or demonize them. Let's ask questions and see how we can help, because it's so much more nuanced than just somebody maybe doesn't want to be involved or they aren't showing up as we would want them to.
Excellent, thank you very much. I want to tap into something that our morning keynote spoke about, the idea of stories and the power of stories. And so what I'm going to ask for the panelists, and every one of you doesn't need to necessarily respond, but if you feel so inspired, please feel free. We'll make the space for it. But if you could tell us a story of an example where an engaged father figure, doesn't necessarily have to be a biological father, but an engaged father figure made a significant difference within your area of expertise.
I will go. My father is someone who I don't have the closest relationship with now. But when I was growing up, I did for a long time a rebellious child, rebellious children, and parents who don't understand rebellion don't oftentimes get along that well. And when I was younger, though, there was a story that this was relayed to me, and it has an impact on me. It wasn't so much something I remember, but I was on a bus with my father, and my father is obviously black. I am biracial, and I look like whatever you want me to be in that moment. That's what I get my entire life. And so he was on the bus, and I was crying, and I wasn't doing what he wanted me to do. And somebody called the police because they didn't think I was his child. And the police came, and they're asking him questions. And they're asking me questions, and I'm not participating, I'm not cooperating, I'm not saying I know he's my father, I'm still upset about whatever stupid thing it was that I was upset about. And they called my mother, and for whatever reason, calling my mother was enough for them to say, okay, we believe that this is your son. I don't know why that was the thing. But they went away, and the bus goes on, and my father like tickles me, and I start laughing, and I say, stop it, Daddy. And he says, oh, now I'm Daddy. And I think of that though because I think any parent gets infuriated at their children, right? And I ask myself that a lot when I'm getting mad, and how my father was dealing in that very moment with, the racial implications, not just the parental implications of the moment. And just him to like tickle me afterwards, right? It's like, we're good, it's just the grace and the love that he showed me in that moment. And that's something that I think of as a story in the work that I do, because we're dealing with a lot of people who, even if they're not fathers, they just need a lot of understanding and grace, because life, especially in America, it doesn't create the greatest possibility for equality in the way people find themselves later in life. And how we view that, again, nuance of sin and irresponsibility, and how people have been one thing and they can be something different, is something I'm always trying to find ways to explain to folks, and to explain to those of us that have a record to have grace for yourself, because it's not that simple, and everyone has their bag that they carry in life.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, then I'm going to deliver on a promise that I had at the very beginning. We have about maybe 1 or 2 minutes left. If one or two of you could talk about a creative way that you could collaborate around engaging fathers in the work that you do.
Yeah, I'll start. In my previous life, when I was in North Carolina, we had a program called Dads on Patrol, and it was dads not on patrol in the street, but we went to high schools and middle schools, and we did mentorship there. We played games with kids. We did reading, math activities. Science tricked the kids into thinking that we're playing games and they're actually learning. And it was really about safety. It was about role modeling. It was about adding a sense of security. And we had our own T-shirts, and there's an acronym for it. I can't remember what it was now, but I really liked that, because it was like we're doing our part to ensure that the schools are safe. We're doing our part to ensure that we're showing a positive image of men, and it was really nice. It was Dads on Patrol, and we did it once a month. When you sign up, you had to agree to do it. We went through the volunteer portal and made sure we were vetted and all that other good stuff. But I really enjoyed it. It was one of those things where I didn't think I was going to enjoy it so much, right? I was like, man, I don't want to go back into a school. I have these thoughts and whatnot. But once we did that, I really, really enjoyed it. And I think that would be, I would probably have to do a lot of research to see how it works. But, you show up, you're not a police officer, you're not a construction worker or a firefighter or whatever your job may be. You're just a dad. You're someone that's there in the schools to help out. And it was really a positive experience for me.
Excellent. So I think we are out of time, but I do want to challenge us, all of us, wherever you're working, whatever space you find yourself connected to. It sounds like Chief Barnes is telling you that he has a project that you could be involved in, that you could help him with getting off the ground. I volunteer to help you.
Okay, there you go.
So thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much for your participation.
Can I get another round of applause for this amazing panel?